ComBank Summit, Forward Together 2025, creating a sustainable future.
Colleagues, and thank you very much for that kind introduction. It put a lot of weight on my shoulders, I must tell you. So let's see how it goes. I will do justice anyway. Colleagues, the organizers, thank you very much once again for inviting me to do this keynote speech, which is on a subject that is close to my heart, agriculture. And we are talking about sustainable agriculture. Feeding the future. It's been a challenge ever. Every time when we talk of agriculture, we are talking about feeding the nation, feeding the whole population tomorrow. That's future. And that's what we are looking at in the long term, how we are going to perform it, because there are a lot of challenges in front of us. We have to face them, definitely, and move forward. Sorry. Yeah, evolution in agriculture, that's something that we have to look at it. Agriculture has always been full of technology, starting from the most primitive technology, evolving over years like this, and ends up right now as we speak of sustainable agriculture. If you look at the timeline and look at the years, for example, as given from the beginning, don't go up to 9000 BC, but let's look at 20th century, 2000, 21st century, and so on. You will always see Sri Lankans are late adopters with respect to technology. I will bring you some example to show how we collectively have missed the bus in terms of achieving sustainable agriculture and directed our ideas, views, vision in different areas, going on tangent in certain cases, trying to revert back. Those have costed us a lot. That's the key that we all should keep in mind when we talk of sustainable agriculture. But the word sustainable, colleagues, I think that is the most misused word on this planet Earth, sustainability, and the word sustainable. Why I say that? Let's have a look at it. Just a few weeks ago, the SDG Achievement Report for 2025 was released. This was highlighted by the UNDP representative also today morning. But let's look at the result. What does it say? None of the 17 SDG goals can be achieved by 2030. None. Not to get disheartened, there are a lot of reasons for this, but do remember, we are going to face a massive challenge. We entered into this SDG era with a lot of hope in 2015, but here comes certain aspect which is beyond our control, like COVID-19. I heard one time when the Deputy Director General of the FAO, who spoke online at the conference held in 2023, which is called the International Climate Change Conference, she categorically said that the targets will be achieved maybe in 2065, not 2030, the targets that we have set. But that doesn't mean we are going to leave it out. That's the important point. We should know the reality, but still work towards it. And if you look at Sri Lankan scenario, SDGs, I mean, look like Sri Lanka is faring above the global scenario. That's an interesting thing. And if you look at the bottom corner, what's in green, which says that by 2025 we have achieved our targets and we have shown the correct direction. We are on the correct track to achieve that goal. What is that goal? Climate action. And that exactly Sri Lanka has performed well right up to now, thanks to the policies that the country has developed, established, and has started getting worked out. I'm sure you heard a lot about NDCs from today morning, Nationally Determined Contributions. We have done National Determined Contributions 3.0, about to be released, probably maybe next month after the cabinet approval. So a lot of things are happening in this country right now with the participation of many. I know private sector got together and took part as a special session on NDC 3.0 representing all 16 sectors. That's important. Colleagues, when we developed National Adaptation Plan in 2016, there were 10 national workshops. None of the private sector participants were there despite invitations being extended. But look at the change that has happened right now. It's good. I mean, that's a reality. That's how people have started recognizing the importance of climate change, importance of improving productivity, and more importantly, the importance of working collaboratively, joining hands with other sectors. And that's the key. And that will be the most important part when you look at the country's food security as well as overall sustainable agricultural development. Okay, when you talk of agriculture, food security plays an important role. It comes to people's mind. But please do not forget, agriculture alone cannot meet food security of a country. I repeat, agriculture alone cannot meet the overall food security of the country. The trade will have to work. Trade will have to work. Sri Lanka, even sometimes we say we are self-sufficient or we produce more than what we can consume, still we import rice. Why? To satisfy certain part of this society, our tourism industry. Okay, it's important to know that the term food security is defined in such a way, and there's a key term called individual preference. You cannot feed people by force. It's a preference what matters. It's a conceptual framework. That's what is meant by food security. Right? We all have to understand. All those things will have to come together to make sure food security is achieved in a country. So it's agriculture plus international trade. And there are many global indices to show that how this food security is assessed of different countries. One such index is the Global Food Security Index, which started to be published since 2012, if I remember correctly. And the latest available right now on the web, not the 2025 one, but the 2022 Global Food Security Index. When you look at Sri Lanka's positioning in this Global Food Security Index, which was published in 2022, this is where I stand. I only took some of the examples out of 113 countries, 113 countries where the Global Food Security Index have been calculated and been published. Now, please do not forget, Global Food Security Index, whoever calculated, will use data provided by a country. They don't access data from here and there and do that calculation and give us an indication and show that this is the position of Sri Lanka. No, Sri Lanka is the country, or we will have to provide relevant information to the people who do this Global Food Security Index, calculate it, and then they will do that calculation and make sure the index is published with respect to Sri Lanka. That's the way that it moves forward. So no one can blame if some data are missing in this calculation called Global Food Security Index. If it's missing, that means we have not provided that information. And very recently, just last Monday means last week's Monday, the Presidential Secretariat finally decided to have a national level workshop with the support of Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Food Program, where a national level food security index, an initiative being given to develop a national level food security index. So work will start continuing, right? So let's see how it moves forward. If that happens correctly, then of course we will have enough ammunition to provide to the people who do this calculation of GFSI to make sure Sri Lanka is well positioned and also to reflect the correct situation of the country with respect to food security. But for the time being, we have to accept certain things that are there in the global scenario to show that this is our position with respect to food security. But I know most of the time when we say this, people will start blaming the Department of Agriculture from square one, whack them outright, saying that they have done nothing. But do remember, thanks to the Department of Agriculture, we are now here at this stage, not at the bad positioning, but that's how and why we can consume a diverse range of food products in this country. We consume kiri samba thanks to the Department of Agriculture. We consume red rice like what is that, all kakulu sambas, all those things that you mentioned, we consume because of them. It came through their breeding programs. And do remember, we do not import seed paddy. All seed paddy are produced here in Sri Lanka. And we do not cultivate hybrid rice. Do not, although we have two varieties. We do not cultivate hybrid rice. We cultivate rice that come out of normal breeding programs, which are high yielding. Thanks to the Department of Agriculture and their scientists, we from the Faculty of Agriculture at Peradine will also take part of the pride, because majority of them are our products who are doing this work. So that's why I'm bringing this information to you, to understand what's happening in this country. But do remember, it's not to say everything goes well. There are a lot of deficiencies, a lot of things that we have to improve. Let's talk about those things as well. And to reflect what's happening in the whole world, if you look at 2022 data with respect to paddy yield, tons per hectare or kilograms per hectare. This is where Sri Lanka stands. Look at where Pakistan, Thailand, Malaysia, Cambodia, Myanmar, Nepal, India, Philippines, and then comes Sri Lanka. See the level at which that we have achieved. And this is the productivity level that is there. This is the sustainability that we have maintained over the years. In 1940s, our yield was mere 650 kilograms per hectare. Thanks to these breeding programs, that yield have brought in 80 years' time though, to a level of 4,500 kilograms per hectare. That is the development. That is the sustainability that we speak of. Not sustaining at a lower level. But of course, all these get affected, very unfortunately, due to certain other aspects. And let's look at that information as well. Since 2020, what I told you, what I showed you a little while ago with 1 point data with respect to Sri Lanka is the productivity. That means tons per hectare or kilograms per hectare. But this figure shows you the total production that we have had. Sri Lankans need about 3.8 million metric tons of paddy per year in order to produce rice that is good enough for people to consume within a year. Hope you got that point. We don't consume paddy, we consume rice. So paddy has to get converted into rice. So we have to produce adequate amount of paddy so that the required quantity of rice can be given. What we require in a given year is roughly about 2.4 million metric tons of rice. In order to give that 2.4 million metric tons, we have to produce 3.8 minimum, 3.8 million metric tons of paddy. That's how the conversions work. That's how rice is made available. Availability of rice is there for Sri Lanka. But look at what happened due to very unfortunate scenarios like in 2021, where an irrational decision was made to block importation of, or block import and use of two very important inputs with respect to agriculture, fertilizer and pesticides. That's history, but just to understand what I said, look at the dip that we have had in 2022, and we are still struggling to achieve the status that was there in 2020 and 2021, not only in terms of total production, but in terms of productivity as well. In terms of productivity as well. Do keep in mind, that's an important point to understand, right? We are moving forward right now, moving upward. 3.392 in 2022 was not adequate enough. That's why we had to import it's more than that, right? Quite a significant amount of rice to the value of $300 million in 2023, at a time that Sri Lanka was struggling hard to find foreign exchange. So when you make a mistake, that becomes historical, it's true. But the society will start paying the price for ages sometimes. And for the past 3 years, we have been doing so. I always say this year, do keep in mind, colleagues, the Maha season that we just harvested, 2024-2025, we completed harvesting in March this year. That was the worst Maha season that was ever there since 2019, if you remove 2022 from the calendar. If you remove 2022 from the calendar, this Maha season was the worst in terms of production, total production. Okay, so that's something that we have to be aware. And that's something the government will have to be aware more than any one of us, to make sure the rice is made available where the Sri Lankans will not be in trouble at the end, so that we can move ahead and make sure required amount of main staple is there in the country. Now this Maha season failure is not because of human error. I must tell you that. It's because of extreme weather conditions that we faced in December 2024 and late January in 2025, where we lost about 79,000 hectares of paddy land in terms of getting better productivity. And that made sure the yield has reduced and the productivity has gone down. That means climate change plays havoc, despite the fact how good the technology that is there with us. And this is exactly what has happened over the years, colleagues. When you talk of climate change, we start feeling it in different ways. But increase in temperature or the heat is something that makes sure we all feel something wrong is happening around us. This is how the temperatures have changed. Since temperature data has been made available to a global community, 2024 has been the warmest year on record. And 2024 is following that 2025 is now following very closely behind 2024. That's not a good sign at all. And remember, many people spoke of Paris Agreement. They said the increase in temperature by the end of 21st century should be kept below 1.5 degrees Celsius. Last year was the only year where increase in temperature went above 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to what was there before the Industrial Revolution. Something alarming. It's not to say we will continue this pattern, but do keep in mind there are changes that are happening which is beyond our control. And that's the vision that we have to have for future. Understand what is there in store for us, especially when it comes to nature. And more importantly, if you look at the 10 warmest years in the world, recorded ever in the world, all 10 years were in the 21st century. And we have just completed 25 years, starting from year 2000. The top 10 warmest years have been in the 21st century. This is something that we have to be cognizant about. You simply cannot ignore. It is a past, I do understand, but we can predict and project the future based on the information that are there. This is what's happening in Sri Lanka. Without showing you much information, I thought of summarizing everything here. Since 1961, colleagues, our environmental temperature has been increasing at 0.01 degrees Celsius minimum per year. Look very small, isn't it? But it's since 1961. 64 years have passed since 1961. So multiply this value by 61, 64. Then you can understand the level of increase of environmental temperature since 1961 up to 2024, and how fast, how rapid the temperature increase has been. And those things are going to affect our crop production. That is where a huge sustainability issue come up. These are the data from Department of Agriculture about the paddy that we have produced, as well as the requirement. The black dotted line tells us about the requirement of the country. The red line talks about the annual production total, and the blue line talks about the extent that we have cultivated. Our extent since 1950 has increased only by 2.7%, 2.7-fold, I'm sorry. 2.7-fold, but the production and productivity has increased by 7.9-fold. Hope you got the point. So increasing extent is not what matters here. The productivity that we have taken out of a given land area is the one that has contributed mostly. And if you look at the overall scenario, I'm sure people who know about the history know these things happen. When the productivities were very low, there were issues. And look at these dips, despite the fact production has been increasing. All those dips are because of drought, because of climate playing hell, I must tell you, in this production process. Look at what happened in 2016, 2017, the worst ever drought experienced by Sri Lanka. Our paddy production came down dramatically. But what happened in 2022 was something else. That's not climate. So let's forget about it. We are talking about climate change right now. So this is the level of impact climate can have when it comes to agriculture. So the important point now, what is in store for us in the future in order for us to think of technology, in order for us to think of real sustainability in terms of higher production and productivity. This is what's going to happen by all means. With all the results done by experiments done by scientists in this country, this is what it says. A new analysis coming tomorrow may change this picture. But up to now, until the time that I'm talking to you, now the prediction is that our wet zone or wet season going to get wetter, dry zone or dry season going to get drier. Wet season, the problem is more water, even now. Wet season going to get wetter means more and more water, more troublesome. Dry season, the problem is less water. It's going to get drier, it's going to be worse. Had the wet zone become little drier, dry zone become little wetter, that would have been a blessing in disguise in the wake of climate change, but that is not in store for us. So let's keep this in mind. All industries, depending on the region of the country, when you look at future, when you try to develop your projects, please keep this thing in mind, okay, every time. There are solutions, not to say we are in the dark. There are solutions. There are way outs always to any problem on this planet Earth. Agriculture truly it contributes to food security. But as I told you, it alone cannot ensure food security. And our job always is to make sure the contribution of agriculture to food security is going to be maximum. That's our target, is going to be maximum. But we simply cannot ignore that agriculture also contributes to climate change by increasing greenhouse gas emissions. So this is the level at which agriculture would contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. You can see where it goes. And when you look at go into a deep dive and look at paddy fields and look at ruminants, do remember all these things happen naturally. When a paddy field is rich in organic matter, when you go and plow it, there's a phenomenon called ebullition where methane will be reduced. You cannot stop that. Every time when a ruminant like cattle regurgitates, that's the normal nature, regurgitates, methane releases, that's natural. Only way out is to kill all the animals. That's all. There's no way out. That cannot be done. So all these things will have to be taken into account. These things that provide important food and nutrition for us contributes to climate change. Take us, you and me, we respire. We take in air and we exhale air rich in carbon dioxide, and we are contributing to climate change in that sense. All those are natural processes. The only thing that we have to do is we have to make sure we will not exacerbate the situation. That's an important point. That's where the technology matters. The solution is agriculture still, colleagues. Adaptation matters a lot. There are different ways, mechanisms that we can move forward. I'm not going to take every point at this particular time. But there are experts, there are capable people who will provide solutions and make sure they are planted on ground. And that's how Sri Lanka has moved forward in the wake of climate change. There have been ups and downs, but we have bounced back. If you saw that graph very clearly, even after very drastic drought, Sri Lanka bounced back. But we are still struggling to bounce back from a fertilizer ban. Very unfortunate, despite the climate being done very well. But do remember this aspect as well. If the temperature starts continuing up to 2050, for example, the way it goes right now, there's a highly likely chance the temperature will go beyond critical points where the crops can withstand, crops can tolerate. This is something that people are worried right now. Department of Agriculture, many scientists are now developing varieties to make sure that they will tolerate temperature conditions, they will tolerate heat, so that the productivity will be there. So those are something that are extremely important. Every time when there's a calamity, a problem, terminologies crop up. People coin words. People come up with new ideologies. And one such new ideology, which has been there in the past, but a name being given as regenerative agriculture, is gaining ground right now globally. It's basically talking about soil health, talking about human nutrition, talking about environment, while making sure productivity is there. No point talking about those things, the productivity is not achieved. If you don't have food to eat, for example, right, having a secured environment does not going to add value to our life. So that we have to understand always. But this is coming up, and more importantly, these are how the main business entities around the world, not in Sri Lanka, have planned for 2030 with respect to regenerative agriculture. They want to make sure that they move forward, support their clients, support the consumers as well, and support the environment, while making sure this technology will be brought in. But we have to make sure one thing. Just because the technology is there, we should not jump at it unless we do a proper analysis. This analysis is not to say we take ages to do that and do something on ground. No, we have to be very careful and we have to be mindful of what we are doing. Not that regenerative agriculture is wrong. Don't take it in that spirit. I'm not talking about negative on that aspect, but I'm talking about certain principles that are being brought in by people, which you have to assess very carefully. A lot of people say that nitrogen is a huge problem in our environment. Yes, nitrogen is the most dynamic nutrient element, which is very difficult to control. I was trying to assess global database and to see where people say there are a lot of nitrogen in our environment, excess nitrogen, excess urea, to see whether it's correct. Unfortunately, the most latest globally accepted database that I could access was in 2014, 10 years ago, say 11 years ago, but look at what it says. Look at where Sri Lanka is. These are the excess amount of nitrogen. 2013, some people were quoting some data and say Sri Lanka is the country that has used highest amounts of fertilizer, highest amount of pesticide. This was published, even now people published in their website erroneously, without giving the year of publication. Year was 2013, but still they do as if it is happening right now. This mismessaging will have to stop at any given cost, without giving wrong information, erroneous information to the people. Look at what is there. And all those countries above Sri Lanka now give grants to Sri Lanka to make sure nitrogen fertilizer is reduced. And if that has happened, look at this data. Look at this data. This is strange to me, to tell you very frankly. Data provided by National Fertilizer Secretariat of the country. 2020, at that time, government gave fertilizer free of charge. You remember, they gave fertilizer free of charge. And you can see, if you look at paddy only, 110% of the requirement have been used or at least purchased by paddy farmers. Forget about used by paddy farm. But thereafter, until this year, I could not put this latest information, until 2024, the amount of nitrogen that has gone to paddy production is less than 70% of the crop's requirement. How can we expect more yield? How can we expect more yield? When you don't feed the plant, if you don't give water and feed to animal or cattle, you cannot get expected milk yield, for example. If you start feeding, underfeeding your kid, you cannot expect a vigorous kid growing. Same thing happens with respect to the plant. When I did all the analysis for World Bank and Ministry of Finance very recently, I strongly guess that this is exactly why the yield is stagnating. The yield is stagnant, it's not going up. We have failed to break this 4 metric ton barrier right now. And there was a time we have been breaking it well above. We are still struggling, colleagues. So that's something that we have to be very cognizant. I mean, let's get this crop growing first. Let's get this crop providing yield, which is adequate to feed our nation, and then look at other things in terms of other environmental factors and so on. This is something that we have to work out immediately. Immediately. Otherwise, we'll be continuing this struggle with respect to rice unless we start eating less. If we start eating less, we'll need to produce less. If we start diversing our food habits, not eating rice and doing something else, fine. But if we continue to eat like this and waste like this as well, then this is a problem that we'll face in the continuing future. Very quickly on mechanization. That's about the productivity sustenance. Remember what I told you, colleagues? Sri Lankans have been late adopters. This is why I say they are late adopters. This slide was given to me by Bauer and Company. The first 4-wheel tractor came to Sri Lanka in 1919. 1919, more than 106 years ago. This is a Ford tractor. And people did not want to accept it. They said in Sinhala, yakada yaka ape rassawal gili. So nothing doing. No tractors in our agriculture. Same thing happened in 1952 when the first Massey Ferguson tractor was in Sri Lanka. People did not allow it to be used. 1968 was the first paddy mechanized harvester. People did not allow this machine to be used in this country. Governments wanted, private sector wanted, but our own people did not allow these technologies to be used. But now, the time that you and me are talking about right now, here comes, by the end of 1990s, combine harvesters being used even without being recommended by any entity. Even to the point that I speak right now, we don't have a recommendation. We don't have, but people use it heavily. We don't have a recommendation on the speed of the machine. We don't have the recommendation of optimum maturity stage of the crop where the machine can be put in and do the harvesting. And we do not have records on harvest losses because the jerk that machine creates, will definitely make sure shattering takes place at a certain level. I'm telling this with facts, not producing information here. But it's important that all these items go in and make sure the sustainability is measured in all these terms so that our agriculture will prosper. The next slide that I'm going to show you will embarrass me a bit. I know it's going to be embarrassment, but still I'm showing it because I'm in that picture. In 2016, we made a valiant effort, myself and Mr. Manju Gunawardana, we made a valiant effort to introduce drones to agriculture in this country. And this went on news like this in 2016, in August. Same year, In December, Haley's did the same thing. But both entities failed. There were no takers. People were worried about drone technology. They didn't want to even touch a drone and to see drone spraying is done. But now, earlier, people were looking at a drone like looking at something that is alien, comes from somewhere. But look at the story that we have with respect to T-25 drones, the most sophisticated DJI drones owned by one single company in this country, providing services at a fee, providing services with a MOU with Ministry of Agriculture and entering 64 agrarian service centers out of 566, providing services for a fee to the paddy farmers to spray pesticides, spray weedicides, spray fertilizer, aerial, and they are now trying to do broadcasting seeds using this technology. So things are moving fast, but remember, we were late adopters, very unfortunately. So sustenance will not come in that manner, but I'm glad at least right now something is happening. Food system is the key of today. Food system works in a cycle, works in a circle, and of course, remember, production comes from the rural areas, consumption comes from the urban areas. Without this rural-urban connectivity, agriculture will not survive. Sustenance will never be there with respect to food consumption and availability. This is something that we have to make sure we maintain. When there's a drought, farmers have never complained that they don't have food to eat. They have food to eat. Complaint comes from the urban sector, from the cities, saying that there's no food to eat. Farming community and people in the rural area are always well off in terms of food consumption. I'm not saying they are wealthy. In terms of food consumption, they make sure the food is available for them. But to the market, that is where the problem is. So if you do not maintain this urban-rural connectivity, we'll fail in our system. That's what food system means. Starting from the input supplier, producer, person who stores, person who become the transporter to the storage, the miller, transporter comes in once again, the wholesaler, retailer, and consumer. This is a cycle that we are talking about. If that thing doesn't move well, then of course the overall food production, availability, everything will fail. So we have to be mindful of that. This is the point that we are looking at. All private sector industries, if you can come and strengthen each of these nodal points in the case of food system, then the agriculture system will work. That is what we need. Banking sector, whoever. The private sector, there we need that. Don't just come up with one technology. Single technologies cannot work. Technologies work as packages. Packages is the one that will work. And make sure people strengthen all these nodal points that have been highlighted in this food system chart. Then and only then things will work. Colleagues, we have been always talking about storage losses. We have been telling we don't have adequate storage. There are always losses in terms of storage. But we have never thought of how far the food travels from the point of production and until it reaches the consumer. So this study, once again funded by FAO, which I led the study, and with large number of people coming into picture, we did a food flow analysis for 7 commodities in this country. And mind you, one rice variety, one paddy variety, travels from Hambantota to Polonnaruwa and then travels to Colombo. Hope you got that point. From Hambantota to Colombo, converted into Rosakakulu, and then come to Colombo. Because the red rice cannot be converted into Rosakakulu in Hambantota mills. Only mills that are available is in Polonnaruwa. So we have to send them to Polonnaruwa. It travels more than 450 kilometers when you come to Colombo. And each kilometer, each foot, for example, is a cost. The price is added. Finally, you pay more price, very unfortunately, just for traveling. Nothing else. So these are the things that we have to consider. These are the information we also provide collectively to government of Sri Lanka, like producing maps like this to show how the food flow mapping take place. And I'm sure you cannot read that, but this is the network of rice mills in Sri Lanka. Network of rice mills in Sri Lanka. Just imagine, no one knows how they travel. For example, how they come to the consumer's plate at the end. This is the penultimate slide that I'm going to show you before I give my recommendations. Climate smart agriculture, colleagues, is something that will work, that has worked in the past, And of course, we'll work in the future. Climate smart agriculture means nothing new. It's the same technological packages that we have used, but use it cognizantly, knowing why you do this. That's the important part. And very recently, the FAO once again took the leadership. Though I was not involved in, they calculate how much investment is required for climate smart agriculture in Sri Lanka from 2025 to 2030. Staggering. What it says is you need $1 billion to make sure climate smart agricultural recommendations are implemented on ground. And we need 16% out of that to make sure rice goes through a climate smart package. So it's not easy. It's easier said than done always. Let's not try to do everything, but we'll make sure a better combination comes in so that we can be happy in the future. Because there's always a call for action. This call for action, once again, colleagues, is not for tomorrow, not for today, but to start from now. That's the only way forward. At least that thinking comes in. We have all those important facilities with us, but let's try to use them. And in order to use them, I just come up with 3 important salient points. Collaboration will not work if body chemistry do not match. Body chemistries will have to match, and we have to understand each other to move ahead with collaboration. So let's try to see how that collaboration can be built up. Food system transformation is a must. This food system, strengthening the different nodal points in a food system to make sure it works well, works better than it is right now. And this rural-urban connectivity. If we fail in that by losing one nodal point in that complicated food system, the whole food supply will fail. The whole food supply will go for a 6. That's what happened. So our decisions should be made looking at the whole food system, not to punish, penalize, or targeting one nodal point in this food system. That's the mistake that we have done. Mistake that has been done at the highest political level in this country over the years, happening even right now. We don't want to put the main millers in trouble. What we want is to get them on board to support the food system. That's where it works. And that's how people have to work together. And with that little information given to you, thanking the organizers for inviting me to deliver this keynote speaker, I thank everyone, colleagues, for your patience listening. Thank you very much.